Meanwhile, from Washington's perspective, there's a lot of frustration in Ukraine on the indecision, the lack of honoring the Ukrainians' request for more sophisticated lethal aid, and putting sanctions on Russia in place now, with the promise then to pull those sanctions back if Putin de-escalates. But talking tough about what we're going to do after Ukraine is invaded doesn't do the Ukrainians a whole lot of good.
Hey, it's Sandra here. So we're just starting to see the actual statement that Zelensky put out. And I'll just read a bit of it to you. Trace just read a bit of it as well. He announces the statement to the great people of a great country. It's rather lengthy. In it, he says, we are told that February 16th will be the day of the attack. That, of course, is the U.S. intelligence that John Kirby has said the Pentagon has picked up on that would confirm that they were looking at that day. John Kirby says that we have shared any intelligence we have with Ukraine. So February 16th is the day of the attack. We will make it a Union Day, says Zelensky. The decree has already been signed. This afternoon, we will hang national flags, put on blue, yellow ribbons, and show the world our unity. I just would ask you, Michael Waltz, what that tells you. So there's no asking Ukrainians to hunker down, not that I can tell yet. I will read it in its entirety, but it is show our strength, rather.
Well, exactly. And I think, again, this is Zelensky trying to walk that line. If he echoes that the invasion is coming, you could see massive refugee flows. You could see, a complete shutdown of the Ukrainian economy, a run on their banks, and all kinds of other issues that I think he wants to avoid. He's almost in an impossible situation here. And I think this is, by having this broader demonstration of showing of resistance, he's hoping to deter Putin from actually doing this.
Congressman, is there? Yeah. Go ahead, Sandra.
No, I was just wondering if I could follow up on that. Do you think it surprised Putin, this show of strength from Ukraine and Zelensky? Do you think that he underestimated the reaction from the Ukrainian people?
I do. I think that on the one hand, best case scenario for Putin would have been for that political and economic collapse to have already happened. He could have met his objectives, which are to sever Ukraine from the West and to sow divisions within NATO. He could have met those objectives without even firing a shot. That's what he's hoping to do. And then I also, and the intelligence community is a bit mixed on this, that Putin believes that the Ukrainian people are just going to roll over, just like what he saw in Crimea in 2014. But I think Putin may be underestimating the nationalism and the resolve that has been generated in Ukraine as a result of that invasion into Crimea, and also the fact that there is a shooting war going on right now as we speak in the Donbass in eastern Ukraine. Everywhere I went when I was there, we saw memorials to the Ukrainian soldiers that are dying every day in that ongoing war in eastern Ukraine. So Putin could be underestimating. That's why I've called for increasing lethal aid, speeding it up, and making it clear that we will continue to provide an ongoing Ukrainian resistance, not to get U.S. soldiers in a shooting war, but to make Putin believe that this could turn into a military quagmire for him. And I think that's the only thing that would deter him, is if he thought this would become too costly militarily.
Congressman, I want to read some more of this statement coming out. It says, quoting here, and this is just a part of it, "We are frightened by the Great War." This is from Zelensky. "And the date of the military invasion is set again. This is not the first time. They are systematically waging war on us all at all fronts. In the military, increase the contingent around the border. On the diplomatic front, they are trying to deprive us of the right to determine our own foreign policy course. In the energy sector, they limit the supply of gas, electricity, and coal. On the information front, they seek to sow panic among citizens and investors through the media. But our state today is stronger than ever." And my question to you, Congressman, would be, how unusual is this for the U.S. and for Russia to telegraph that they're coming in on Wednesday. Is there a play from President Putin saying, you know what, here's 2 days' notice. We need to get our diplomatic house in order. We need to get the concessions we asked for, or there will be hell to pay?
Yeah, I do think this is the ultimate form of brinkmanship on Putin's part. He's taking old plays out of the Soviet playbook. Remember, he was the station chief for the KGB in East Germany back during his career. And he's pulling all of those plays out of disinformation, of brinkmanship. And I think ultimately he believes that he'll receive a weak and divided response from the United States and NATO, just as he did in 2014. But he's also, by telegraphing, hoping, as we discussed, to sow panic within Ukraine itself and either achieve his objectives with a political collapse or make it much easier to do so militarily with a more limited invasion.
On that note, though, can I just follow up? Telegraphing, it's not like Russia announced that they were going to attack on Wednesday. This was intelligence that was picked up that revealed these plans to do so. Are you suggesting Vladimir Putin purposely laid out those plans for U.S. intelligence to pick that up to sow fear?
Well, I think with the amount of forces that he's moving, remember, he's moved the key ships from his Pacific fleet, his Northern fleet, his Arctic fleet, on top of what he already had in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, not to mention thousands of train loads of military hardware from Siberia, from east to west. He knows we're going to pick all of those things up. Remember, he was an intelligence officer himself. I think they have an idea of what we're going to pick up. And at the end of the day, whether he actually goes on the 16th or he waits till the end of the Olympics on Sunday the 20th, he can have that intimidation factor and that psychological warfare factor. So for him, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and by the way, we just want to read this. This is from Secretary of State Antony Blinken talking about evacuating the embassy. He says in part here, these prudent precautions in no way undermine our support for our commitment to Ukraine. Our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is unwavering. We also continue our sincere efforts to reach a diplomatic solution, and we remain engaged with the Russian government following President Biden's call with President Putin. But we know, Congressman, that call with President Putin didn't really churn up anything. I mean, there was nothing that came of it, so it was all for naught. You have the German chancellor now kind of going in saying he's going to try diplomacy. I guess they're telling everybody, or at least signaling to everybody, you got a couple of days to get this diplomatic thing going. Is that kind of what we're seeing here? Is that everybody is trying to get on all hands on deck diplomatically to see if we can stave this off for 48 hours?
Well, I think this is the last chance from Putin's perspective for the concessions that he wants, which is basically to sever Ukraine from the West and from the EU and from the United States, and also to dictate the future course of NATO. And he knows that because of our energy policies and because of Germany's failed energy policies and moving away from nuclear and towards Putin's Russian and gas supplies, that he's going to have a divided response. And I just can't emphasize enough, guys, that Biden turning off American energy independence and moving us away from our own cleaner, by the way, oil and gas. We doubled U.S. imports from Russia just in the last year, and it's going to have a huge inflationary spike on global oil. And every time that happens, that makes regimes like Russia and Iran richer and more powerful. He also knows that inflation is a huge political issue for Biden, all of which are playing right into his hands, and is going to put this administration on its back foot.
If I could just jump in very quickly here, we're talking about the Nord Stream 2, and everybody should realize the Nord Stream 2 from Russia to Europe is done. It is ready. All they're waiting for is regulators to give them the okay to flip the switch. And the question becomes, how long, you talked about Germany kind of going in there and the chancellor, some last-ditch diplomatic efforts. How long does Germany, Italy, Do they allow these sanctions to remain in place? How long do they allow that Nord Stream 2 stream to be cut off and shut off to them? I mean, what's to say in 2 weeks they don't think, listen, this is not working. We want everything turned back on, and then Russia ends up winning this in the end.
Well, that's right. And that's what happened after 2014 and the invasion of Ukraine then. It was tough for a while, but gradually those sanctions eroded. And I think that's what Putin is betting on this time. And, oh, by the way, during the Beijing Olympics in the Xi-Putin summit just beforehand, they signed a Siberian gas deal that's going to come from the same gas fields so that in a few years, Putin will be able to sell gas into China and completely cut Europe off and have their cake and eat it, too, if Europe doesn't accede to their demand. Yeah. So the energy policy and failed energy policy under American leadership and under this White House's leadership really is at the heart of all of this.
Yeah, just speaking to General Keane on that, he seems to believe that there's not as much leverage in this moment with Vladimir Putin with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline because of the very reason that the gas is not yet flowing through there. It is not a current revenue source for Vladimir Putin. But we'll have more on that in just a moment. If you could stand by, Michael Waltz.